Am I live? Is this thing recording? Hello, everybody, and welcome to Vibrational Shots. My name is Tandiwe, and I'm also known as Hey Tandy on the interwebs. And in today's class, this is my first class with Patreon. I will be talking about having an identity crisis in relationships. I'm inspired to create this class because I was just sharing a lot of my experiences with my sister friends from all over the world, different walks of life, different backgrounds, different cultures. And it was just so interesting that we were having very similar experiences, even in the face of our differences. And so it made me think that, oh my gosh, there must be something happening on a subconscious level, on a deeper level that we need to examine and explore and figure out. So I decided to create this class. So if you find yourself here because you have lost yourself in a relationship, you've left yourself somewhere and you don't even know where to begin looking, trust me, you're not alone. I promise you. You are not alone. You don't have to feel guilt or shame about it. For me, I've kind of learned to take these life experiences for what they are, and they're intended for us to learn from and grow from. So, my intention for this class is to share some of the insights that I learned, some of the experiences that I've had, so that we can just collectively learn to navigate our relationship space more consciously and more clearly. So, yeah, let's just jump right in. First things first, I want to say that love is an agent of change. So when you fall in love, when you step into love consciously, whichever one, love is still going to change you because it is a form of surrender. We're surrendering to the rapture that is love. I mean, love is yummy and delicious. And like, of course, you're going to melt and become soft. Because who doesn't, right? Um, it is natural for that to happen. I think that where we get lost is not figuring out who we are once we fall in love, because there is a part of us that dies, but there is another part of us that is reborn. And it's time for us to take advantage of that and make use of the person that we become in love. Because love can be wonderful, man. um, but yeah, so one of the first, oh, before I get into those talking points, another thing to understand is that love triggers our fantasies, love triggers our wounds, love triggers our needs and desires. And so, this is why it's important to not leave it to chance and fate and to actually navigate this realm way more consciously, because there's so many things happening, child. Hmm, honey. Is there honey, honey? Um, yes, sorry. um, so I have four major talking points that I'm going to be discussing for the duration of this class. The first being the roles that we as women play in relationships. So when it comes to love, society at large has there's certain like programs that we get from society that tell us how to navigate the romantic experience. And the thing that's like really pervasive when it comes to programming is this idea that we're supposed to do things for relationships and to do things in relationships so that we do not get left behind or cheated on or abandoned or whatever the case may be. And I think that that is what destroys the authenticity of a relationship. We shouldn't do things out of fear that we're going to lose something. We should be doing things out of love, because when we do things out of love, that's where we find our fulfillment. So when it comes to playing roles in relationships, the roles themselves, and I'm going to delve a little bit deeper into it, but the roles themselves are not bad. The roles are neutral. It's just that if we inhabit these roles out of fear, what happens is that we are it's easier for us to compromise our essential selves. It's easier for us to align with the other person in the relationship instead of ourselves because we're doing it out of fear. Whereas when you're stepping into, excuse me, when you're stepping into these roles out of love, then you're stepping into it knowing that you're giving something to feel fulfilled and you're gonna receive and feel fulfilled. I hope that makes sense. Mm. Um, so let's talk a little bit about some of the roles that we sometimes play in relationships as women. We can play the role of the lover, the mother slash healer, the friend, and the confidant. Now, the lover's primary need is to connect and to desire and to be desired. And so the lover is who is responsible for initiating or receiving somebody's advances when it comes to romance. That's the part of us that wants to connect and finds fulfillment in connection. The mother slash healer has a primary need of nurturing, to nurture and to be nurtured. The friend's need is for intimacy and comfort, and the confidant's need is for emotional availability and space and distance, space and distance. And sometimes these roles actually they don't work in harmony just because of what they need. So like for example, the lover wants closeness. However, when you want a confidant, when you're in the space of needing a confidant, you're usually going through a crisis of some sort. It's not necessarily closeness that you need. You need someone who can give you a little bit of emotional distance so that you can feel yourself, so that you can work through it. So it's not a matter of like somebody meeting you in your chaos. It's somebody giving you a bird's eye perspective of something that you're going through. That makes sense. So sometimes they can clash. And when we step into these roles unconsciously, these roles become expectations on both parties in a relationship. Oh. Um, when we have expectations, let me actually get my notes because I'm just speaking off the dome right now. um, it's really important for us to examine the expectations that we have for ourselves, the expectations that our partners may have for us, because these expectations become the roles that we play in a relationship, especially when it's coming from that space of fear. So if you're like, oh, I'm gonna be his lover, I'm gonna be his hoe, I'm gonna be his like, and you, oh my God, I'm so fucking. Um, sometimes you, like, let's say you're in the role of the lover. The role of the lover can be very fulfilling for a woman. Like, so it's not necessarily, oh, you're just playing into like the expectations of a man. It can be very fulfilling. However, we're not the same people every day. We are constantly changing. And sometimes in relationships, it's hard for us to make space for that. And so what happens is that like, let's say you the woman, you wake up and you're moody as hell, you're not in the mood to hear nobody, you're not in the mood to listen to anything, you're just not even in the mood to, like, you don't even want to say hi that morning. Now if your partner has this expectation that you're just going to be his lover when you wake up in the morning, it's like you end up becoming imprisoned by that expectation. Now it's like, okay, yeah, of course, if you're a consistent person, the other person will expect something from you. But it's important that we learn how to like create space for people to show up as they are. I think that this is like one of the major things that I discovered in my research, even when talking to people, was that a lot of women feel pressure to stay the same, feel pressure to inhabit the same role, so much so that they ignore the growth that's happening within them. They ignore the emotions that's happening within them. They swallow down parts of their experience so that they can stay in this role that they're expected to play so that they don't get abandoned in this relationship. It's quite insidious when you think about it. You're like, my goodness, like what happens to you as a human being, right? Like what happens? Because you don't even get a chance to explore yourself because you're caught up in the roles. And the reason why I guess I started with this particular talking point is that I see that this is where the first issues happen whenever I'm listening to stories, and even when I'm matching it with my own experience. I'm like, oh, you were playing that role. You got tired of playing that role. And when you try to shift, the other person now questions your commitment. And because you're like, oh no, I don't want you to think I'm not committed, you continue playing this role instead of allowing yourself to be who you are, even if that person has changed. And one of the examples for this particular point um, is okay, so here's a scenario. Um, so a man may feel that because a woman is his girlfriend, she must spend all of her free time with him. He may push for this to happen to the point where he expects her to give up on other social aspects of her life to fulfill his expectation that he has in mind. If the woman is reluctant and the man is unable to create space for her, then he may resort to emotional manipulation. He may begin to question her commitment to the relationship in order to get her to bend to his will. At this point, he has lost the opportunity to truly understand her. In her frustration, she may emotionally withdraw, even if she may comply with him. So, in that scenario, the man's expectation was not fulfilled. He's expecting that, oh, you're supposed to do X, Y, and Z, whatever the program is. And so, what we're seeing here is that on a subconscious level, he has a fantasy about who his girlfriend is supposed to be for him. And this is what I mean when I say love triggers our fantasies. Sometimes you just get so lost in the fantasy of it all that you don't make space for what's really happening. So like fuck whatever she's going through. Fuck her own life and her time. It's about like he's so inundated by his fantasies. You can also see that subconsciously he has a need. There's an insecurity there in this particular scenario. There's an insecurity that if she is not with him constantly, then um, she must be out doing something, like she's no longer committed to his relationship. So what does he do? He uses his own subconscious patterns of manipulation. He probably learned that from somewhere, probably his childhood, but he learns how to manipulate to get her to align with his will. And that's not good for a healthy, functioning relationship. It's not a matter of compromising your wills. It's about collaborating and cooperating, not compromising. Um, so, yeah, and this scenario happens far too often. And I know that it also happens in the reverse, to be fair. There are some women who will manipulate men to spend all their time with her because if he doesn't, then he's not fulfilling her fantasy that she has in her head. It's really important to look at the fantasy. So if you're not getting what you want in a relationship, or you feel like you're lost in the relationship, maybe examine like what fantasies am I playing out right now? What have I seen that I'm wanting that is not currently present in my in my actual reality? Um, because mm, sorry. Um, sorry. But yeah, so because for any interpersonal relationship to truly work, there has to be this intrinsic understanding that each person is going to show up differently every day, and that the human experience is one of impermanence. We have to mature collectively and accept that change is constant, even in love. I hope that makes a little bit of sense. Okay. So my next talking point is the obsession with men leading relationships. Now, women, woof, we have a hard time with this one. Oh my goodness. Okay. So, due to patriarchy and religious programming, there is an obsession in our culture with men leading the relationship. There's this idea that like men are emotionally, emotionally, mentally, and physically equipped to make life altering decisions for other people in a relationship instead of just himself. And that really, it's perplexing, when you really look at it. You're like, why should a man be leading a relationship, and why should we be defaulting our power to him alone when, like, as a human being, you're complex with desires, shadows, instincts, and impulses. So it's like, it's for me, it's highly problematic um to give away power, or to be expected to give away power simply because of his gender. Sir. That doesn't make sense to me, but it is something that is pervasive in our culture. Men are supposed to lead just even the dance of romance itself. Now, I'm not gonna mess with that because um there is a level of fulfillment in that too, where like a man initiates the romantic thingy and then you sort of like follow his lead in that sense. I'm not gonna mess with that. I just think we do need to examine the idea that the decision making is only up to one person. That's the part that makes no sense to me. Simply because, in order for two people to create a relationship where both parties can experience fulfillment, happiness, and satisfaction, both people's point of views need to be considered. Both limitations, both people's limitations need to be considered and planned for. Now, what do I mean about limitations? I'll give you an example from my experience. So, I had an ex who loved going to concerts. Like, concerts are his thing. Like, he loves them. And so he wants to share that aspect of his life with me. Now, I'm a highly sensitive person, meaning that, just briefly, as a highly sensitive person, I take in more sensory information than the average human being, about 20% more. And so it's that much more easier for me to be overwhelmed by experiences where I'm in crowds, where my senses are being like bombarded with information. And so um, I remember we went to a concert, and they were like, you could either stand on the floor and watch the concert, or you could go up to the balcony seats. And I remember being so uncomfortable being amongst the people, but I didn't know how to um, tell him, because I'm like, oh my God, like, what if he's enjoying himself down here? But I was not enjoying myself at all. And I'm like, at the end of the day, I also paid for this concert ticket. So I need to talk to him. So I let him know, like, hey, can we move up to the balcony seats? And he allowed it. He was like, yeah, for sure. And we both had an amazing time, and we both had a great experience. And I was away from like the main crowd. And even though there were people up on the balcony, there was a sense of space that allowed me not to feel overstimulated. But that's a limitation. As a highly sensitive person, that's a limitation. I can't do everything that everybody else is doing. However, in order for us to both have a fulfilling experience, I would have to learn how to speak up and say what I need to say so that I can also have a great experience. I hope that makes sense. But you see, like, if I had defaulted to if I had defaulted to my cultural programming, I would be like, I don't want to inconvenience him. I don't want him to not enjoy himself. So I'm just gonna suffer in silence. And it's late for that. It's over for that. We're not doing that anymore. Um, yeah, we're just not doing that anymore, because if we continue to default our power to men, what happens is that women are powerless, but men are miserable. The reason why men are miserable, and you'd be surprised because you think, oh, patriarchy benefits men. Nope, it doesn't benefit them either, because they want to be in a partnership with somebody. They don't want to be talking to a wall. And they can become very miserable because, as women, we think, oh, if we suffer in silence, then nobody feels us. And that could be further from the truth. We radiate whatever energy we're feeling. So if we're unsatisfied, he can pick up on it. but you're not asserting yourself. And so he's not a mind reader either. So how is he just supposed to know? Or like, how is he expected to take these like silent cues? Like, that's unfair. And so it's important that change needs to happen on both sides. Men need to learn how to create space for women to assert themselves, but women also need to learn to assert themselves within that space. They need to learn how to take up space. Yeah. um yeah. Okay, cool. Then my next talking point is connection to self. Now, this is incredibly important. This is probably one of the more important points that I wanted to make for this class, but let me take a little sippy sip before I do. Mm. Sorry, this tea's so good. This tea is so good. Oh my God. I'm having ginger and honey tea. My sister made it for me. All right. Okay. So the next talking point that I wanted to talk about is the connection to self, our connection to ourselves. When it comes to connecting to another person healthily in a relationship, the only way that we can really truly achieve that is by being connected to ourselves. But what does that actually mean? So, conceptually, imagine for a moment that you have a column of energy that runs through your body. This column of energy is essentially your life force. It's connected to your body and therefore keeps you grounded in your personal reality. But it's also connected to your greater reality and the universe. So, this life force and flow is where you get your intuition, your gut feelings. This is where you feel resonance within your personal reality. It's the part of you that offers you confirmation when you're in alignment with all that you are. And so, what I mean by this, to give an example of this, is like um, when I was like 6 years old, um, I saw somebody draw for the first time. It was a classmate, and she was really good. And I watched her draw, and it lit something in my body. I was like, oh, I gotta try and do that. And that's literally how I started drawing. Now, that resonance that I felt came from the external trigger of me seeing her draw, but it was because I was connected to my own life force and my greater reality that was telling me that, oh, drawing is a part of your purpose. Drawing is a part of your life. I mean, in case in point, I produce animation now. So, ta-da! So there's this idea that you have this like life force and life flow, and you staying connected to it allows you to feel and sense when things are resonating with you and when they're not. Now, when you ignore this part of yourself in order to align with the desires of your partner, you're disturbing your own flow. You're essentially abandoning yourself in favor of validation from someone else. The spiritual implications of this type of abandonment is quite serious because it tells a part of your psyche that your input, your life force has no value. In a way, you're betraying yourself. Um, Now, I'm not saying this to induce guilt or shame, but more so to bring awareness to the fact that you have to be a little bit more serious when it comes to protecting your life force and your well being. Your compromising is not just a once off thing with no consequences. It dulls you from being able to feel what's right for you in life, in love, and even in business. Um, and in exploring how to cultivate a connection to self, something that I've discovered is that for a lot of people, there's resistance when it comes to connecting with self. And what happens is like you try for a little bit, it feels uncomfortable, and so you're like, oh, fuck it, I'm gonna leave it alone. But what people don't know is that like where you're feeling resistance, like that's literally where your freedom is. Um, and what I mean by that is like there is this sense of guilt and shame that comes with connecting to self and choosing self and asserting self. And that resistance will tell you where that um, when the resistance in your body will let you know what experiences are connected to you not being able to assert yourself. Because yeah, you can be like, oh no, I'm just shy, I'm just timid, like I'm just, like whatever the case may be. And it's like, um sure, there could be aspects of your personality that are shy and timid, but a lot of the times there is an experience that has sort of like chipped away at your power of assertion. So it's important to not give up when you feel resistance. You want to dive right into that resistance so you can like unpack it, uncover it, and bring it up so that you can give yourself compassion and healing. Because more often than not, those experiences come from our childhood. And I think it comes from also in our culture, there's this very pervasive idea that we're supposed to teach children blind obedience. You just have to listen to me just because. And it's easier, I guess, um, to do that to children, but the implications of that is that when someone learns blind obedience, then they don't learn to think for themselves. They don't learn to make choices for themselves. Um, when a child is kept from asserting and embodying their ego self, it can create a distorted perception of self. It reinforces this idea that you have no autonomy and that you have to have permission in order to be yourself. So when this sort of like spills over or this dynamic transfers into relationships, you feel that you have to get permission from your lover to be yourself too. Does that make sense? Um, so it's really interesting how that sort of plays out. So, in order to process this resistance, it's important to really allow yourself the time and the space to examine the past experience where there's a piece of yourself that's stuck there. Um, and for me, I guess, the process, the way I've learned how to work with that is like when it comes up, it's about understanding what that part of yourself wanted to hear at that time, giving that to yourself in the now moment, and like sending love to that aspect of yourself and calling it back to you so that it can be integrated back into wholeness. Cause like it's sort of like chipped away and sitting at the side. And you can do this process. There are many ways to do this process through release, shadow work, forgiveness. But the idea is that you want to reprogram that part of your psyche to now know that it's okay to now assert yourself. The fear that that piece of you once had no longer exists, right? Remember how I said earlier that like love triggers your wounds, needs, desires, all of that? So, like, let's say you need to assert yourself in a relationship and you start having this level of like fear and anxiety, you'll find sometimes that the fear and anxiety is not even coming from your partner. It's coming from the fear that's stuck in your body that once told you that you're not allowed to assert yourself. Um, so, yeah, so it's really important to do that inner work through journaling, therapy, shadow work, whichever avenue intuitively makes itself available to you. Embrace that shit with open arms because on the other side of resistance is freedom. I promise you. I am speaking from experience. Experience. Um, but yeah. um, okay. So another part of this talking point when it comes to connecting to yourself is learning how to integrate your emotions with your reality. Because once you start doing the work of processing all traumas and experiences, you will have a greater access to your inner realms. And you're going to have to make space for that. And it's a little bit inconvenient, because we can spend our whole lives sort of being like we create a whole life for ourselves unconsciously. And when we start waking up to our inner reality, then we realize that a lot of our outer reality and our inner reality are not in harmony. They're not really cohesive. And so sometimes the awakening process does it is destructive in that some things have to move and shift. You have to make a lot of changes in order to make space for your own emotions. Sometimes it means getting rid of relationships that don't honor you, whether they're friendships, whether they're romantic relationships. Sometimes it's a matter of, you know, changing jobs, sometimes changing where you live. Like it's not always that everything will change all at once, but certainly certain lifestyle changes have to happen because if you created a lifestyle where you're ignoring your emotions and now you're not ignoring them anymore, you're gonna have to figure out how to integrate that, right? Um, and then there's a matter of bringing yourself to the table. So once you've connected to yourself, you want to learn how to bring yourself to the table. So in the process of connecting to yourself in terms of journaling and shadow work, whatever process that you use that works for you, something to consider is because once you start doing out the cleaning out phase, you want to start putting things back there that you do want. So if you don't want to operate from fear anymore, you want to put back in love. If you felt unsafe, you want to reprogram yourself to feel safe. Does that make sense? And so in that process, you start learning more about what you want, what you desire, what your core values are. And this is what's important when it comes to bringing yourself to the table. Because so often we experience romance, and I think I have like a thread that I wrote a couple of days ago where it's like romance just makes you so hot and crazy that you don't even notice if you and your partner actually share the same values, if you share similar goals or a shared vision. And that's really important when you're trying to build a life together with somebody. So when it comes to bringing yourself to the table, you really want to understand what your core values are, and you want to live out those core values in your everyday life. And ideally, your partner should be supporting you in that experience. So, for example, I'll use myself as an example. One of my core values is freedom. I need to be free, child. Now, that doesn't mean that, oh, I want to date like 100,000 people and I just want to, do whatever in that sense. No, but for me, freedom is I just don't want to feel trapped. I don't want to feel like I can't do what I want to do with it. It's like, and for me specifically, it has to do with like being in the world and participating in the world, whether it's my goals or my vision. I don't want to compromise that for anybody. And because I, this is so because our personal reality reflect our goals, usually our experiences are going to come to test what our core values are. So let's say, for example, my core value is freedom. And then I meet somebody that I really like, that I'm like, oh my goodness, like I fucks with you. And then I'm like, yo, I'm trying to be in the world. Like I got to, like, I'm trying to speak. Like one of my goals, for example, is like I want to be a speaker and I want to talk about all of these things that I'm learning about consciousness in the world. And that means I'm going to live a life where I'm traveling a lot, where I'm meeting new people, where I'm just on the road for, especially like, I want to be on the road for like the next 10 years. Like that's my, and like I'm 25, right? So that's like what, 25 to 35. Imagine that. Like, so it's like, I meet, like I'm, okay, fine. Let me just be like real. So I met somebody that I really fuck with. But when I said that I was leaving because I needed to go be in the world and I need to like set up my foundation for my goals, it caused a little bit of friction. I could feel that sense of like withdrawal because I said that. And what I noticed is that because my core value is freedom. My personal reality brought somebody to test that. Like, okay, I'm gonna show you somebody that you like. Are you gonna compromise yourself? And I was like, nope, I am not compromising myself. So for me, um, my goals take precedence in that sense. Now, if I can find a relationship with somebody that I fucks with heavy, and it's a person that emotionally supports my dreams and goals, baby, we're gonna be co-creating. We're gonna co-create. But until then, I'm good, because freedom is my core value. But it's the idea that when you bring yourself to the table, you understand what your core values are. If your core values are family, mine is freedom. It could be justice, whatever thing that's a part of your life purpose, that is a part of your fulfillment of your life overall, with or without your partner. You need to connect to that aspect or those aspects of yourself and bring those to the table. Don't be afraid of being a multidimensional being. We're living in a time and space where, as women, we have access to our multidimensionality. We're no longer being forced to, our roles are not just forced to being in the home and being in service to men. Yes, relationships are part of that, but that's not all that it is. You know what I'm saying? So you want to be able to bring yourself to the table and make changes that honor your core values. Let's see. Okay. And then the final talking point for this class is connection to others. So once you have a connection to yourself, then you can start connecting to others in a way that makes sense. And one of the things that I want to talk about in relation to that is this idea of enmeshment versus connection. And I have a way of conceptually understanding this. Let me try and articulate it as best as possible. So enmeshment is this idea, it's a psychological concept, and it usually comes up in family psychology, where if one family member is feeling upset, then everybody else also feels upset. And so everybody's sort of riding somebody's emotional wave. Like there's no separation between you and another person. This is enmeshment. And that's unhealthy. Whereas connection, the way I like to understand it is imagine two dots and the line forming between the two dots. So this is you, this is someone else, and you have formed a connection. Now, when it comes to relationships, the programming is this is connection, being all up on each other's blah, blah, blah. It's no. Connection is you here, I'm here, and we create this connection through intimacy, through communication, through bonding, through whatever the case may be. And funny enough, when it comes to this idea of connection, when I spoke to a lot of my sister friends, this is something that came up that was very common, is that in our relationships, men want sex all the time. They're like, I just want to be upon you. And that's not a lot, but some of the times, not right now. I don't want it right now. I just want to cuddle, or I just want to, I just want to cuddle, or I just want to talk. And what I think sometimes that men don't understand is that when you allow us to have this non-sexual intimacy, where you cuddle with us or you talk to us, it makes us more receptive to even want to have sex with you in the first place. But I think a lot of the times, one of the reasons why I think actually this happens is because I think men are not allowed to connect to themselves in different dimensions, in the sense that their sexual energy, oh, you're allowed to be sexual, but you're not allowed to come from the heart space. There's this you're weak if you come from a heart-centered space. And yet that's something that men need too. Ain't that crazy? Patriarchy is one hell of a drug, bro. I swear to God. Nonetheless, so it's this idea that with connections are fostered through this line of intimacy. And so if you take the time out to understand what intimate language your partner uses, For example, for me, it's communication. As you can tell, I'm a chatterbox. If you talk to me, if you hear me, if you like just if what I'm saying to you makes sense and I really feel understood by you, oh baby, like I'm on you. Like Lord help you. No, for real. So, but some of my other friends, it's more of a if you cuddle with me, then I'll be more receptive, just non-sexual cuddling. Then somehow I'll. So everybody has their way of feeling close and intimate outside of sex. So if we learn those type of languages, it helps to foster that level of connection. But you have to understand that you're two separate people. You see what I mean? Like you can't be all up on each other and think you're just going to become one person. No, 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 no. You're still two individual people. And back to the point I made earlier in the first talking point, we have to learn to create space for each other, to be different, to change, and like let's flow with the changes. Because I think that's a part of being on the journey together in a relationship is understanding that, oh, this person's going to be different today and tomorrow, and I'm also going to be different today and tomorrow. But let's find a way. Let's find a way to collaborate and to cooperate together. Make sense? Um, and then there's like there's this dance between like intimacy and desire space. And one of my favorite psychologists, Esther Perel, talks about this all the time, is that um, we need intimacy and closeness and nurturing and getting to know each other and seeing each other. But in order for desire to exist, you need space because space allows you to imagine, it allows you to fantasize, it allows you to, just think of your partner as like this delicious meal. And so when it comes to connecting with others, once you've learned how to connect to yourself, connecting to others is understanding this dance between intimacy and desire and not feeling insecure when there is space and distance. Now, for me, I experience this a lot. And I experience this because um, I tend to be more emotionally distant than most women. There's a myriad of reasons I could say. You could say it's because I'm an Aquarius or whatever. Like, there are different like modalities that sort of explain my personality. But the idea is that I tend to create emotional distance between me and my partner. Now, when I was a while ago, it was because I was avoiding. Like if we look at like attachment styles, mine is like an anxious avoidant. Although I've been healing that because I'm starting to become more securely attached to myself. But I'm the one who usually creates emotional distance. However, in my more healthier state now, I don't do it out of fear of vulnerability or fear of being close. For me, it goes back to I have other priorities in my life. And so I will create distance because I have to work. I have to create distance because I got goals that I'm trying to reach. But and I don't do this I'm not all the time. Like I'm learning how to be more conscious of it. But a lot of the time it's very natural. It's like, oh yes, baby, I'm feeling you, I'm around you, da da da. But then I got work. So I create the distance. Now, if I'm dealing with a man who is insecure, then he's going to always want reassurance and always like, oh, why are you, da 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 da, like, come back kind of a thing. But if we're both conscious and we're both present, then that can actually be very enjoyable because I can create distance, which allows you space as the guy to do what you need to do, and then you step towards me, right? Because I've stepped back, you step towards me. That's how you dance. And then maybe something happens in your life where you need a little bit of distance, and then it allows me to fantasize and then step towards you. So there's like this subtle energy dynamic that is possible when it comes to interpersonal romantic relationships. That if you're not, because remember I said that love triggers your wounds and your insecurities and your subconscious things. If you can become conscious of them, then every time someone creates distance, it doesn't have to be a fight, doesn't have to be a, oh, you're like you're running away or you're scared of one, like it can actually be productive towards the like it can contribute, excuse me, to the excitement of your relationship, because it's a matter of just two people being who they are. That's why I said, for me, like, I know that whoever I'm destined to be with is going to understand intrinsically that freedom is a part of my personality, and they're going to have to enjoy it. And there is a way to enjoy it. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a matter of like, oh, he's going to compromise himself and I have to compromise myself. Like, we ain't on that. We ain't on that no more. Okay. Next point is creating realistic goals. Creating realistic relationship goals that are in alignment with your life and not your fantasies. So, for example, um, our culture says, well, yeah, even African culture specifically, there's this idea that as women, we have to be domestic, we have to be, very well versed in the domestic arts, which I am, but it's not necessarily always fulfilling for me. And so the fantasy is like, oh, I'm supposed to be this, like, I'm every woman and I'm cooking and cleaning and folding his shit and still going to work and doing all, like, this is the fantasy, right? Like, I'm gonna do all of this shit. The fantasy that I'm going to do all of this shit. But the reality is, like I said, I have these goals in my life. Like, I have literally like two career trajectories that are happening for me simultaneously. I'm an animation producer, but I'm also a conscious and spiritual channel. And so I have to create space in order for me to channel a lot of the information that I'm offering to people, whether it's through this class or through my Twitter or through my Patreon. And then I'm also creating space to produce my shows, my TV shows, which is like really important to me. And to be honest, they do meet in some kind of way because my TV shows are about spirituality and magic too. So, but I say all that to say that I have a trajectory when it comes to my mission and things that I'm trying to do with my life. And I need to have realistic relationship goals, which means that like, for me, and I'm probably limiting myself, so this or better God, but for me, my ideal romantic situation would be someone who knows how to emotionally support my growth, but also has his own thing going on. And he, like, is mastering himself and his career goals, and somehow we sort of like are able to connect and inspire each other to grow and inspire each other to expand and not limit each other based on our insecurities. That's for me like, that's my realistic relationship. I was like, I just want somebody who can adapt to my life because I can adapt to his. I'm very great at adapting. And part of what made me lose my identity in a relationship was adapting to somebody else without being clear about what I was doing. That was the only thing that made me lose myself. So the whole skill of adaptation is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's like, how do we both adapt? How do we both consciously co-create a relationship where we're both fulfilled? Because we have wants, needs, and desires that only intimacy can fulfill, for sure. But then we also have wants, needs, and desires that we don't fulfill for each other. Like, I'm not going to get fulfillment from my partner, the fulfillment that I get from my partner that I get from talking to you all, right? Or helping somebody work through an emotional issue. Like, I get fulfillment from that. Like, I know I probably should have taken psychology as like, as another major or something, because I really do love walking people through the darkness. Like, I find fulfillment from that. And if I were to project that fulfillment onto my partner, then I'll always be looking for wounds in him to heal. And that's not good either, because he's like, why are you always trying to fix me? Like, it would be that kind of like um energy dynamic, and that wouldn't be healthy. So it's like, understand separating that and being like, okay, I do get fulfillment from walking people through their own darkness and into them finding themselves. So I need to find an avenue that works for me and not conflate that with my relationship. Now, will I maybe hold space for my partner? Sure. But it's not going to be like, oh, if I don't do it with him, then I'm completely unfulfilled. Does that make sense? So it's just about creating realistic relationship goals that align with what makes you fulfilled, not just with your partner, but outside of your partner. And then finally, it's about also embracing conflict as a part of the creative process. Now, if you're like me, I hated confrontation. Like, I'm good at it, but I don't like it. Like, as a highly sensitive person, it really fucks with my nervous system. I feel so drained. I can't do shit for like 3 days, 4 days because I can't do shit for like 3 days, 4 days because I'm so drained from having a confrontation. I don't like confrontation, but conflict is something I'm learning how to do in a healthy way. And it's so important because with one of my relationships, like my most the longest relationship that I've been in, it was one of my favorite relationships. I'm not even gonna front, but we never argued. Like we never argued. We're also very good communicators. However, I do think we probably could have benefited from fighting a little bit, just a little bit of tension. And I know that on my part, the reason why I would not fight is because remember how I said about love? For me, it triggered like, oh, if I fight with him, I'm going to make him upset and then he's going to want to leave me. That makes sense. And so I would not ever start arguments. Like I wouldn't want to because I'm like, oh, I don't want to like upset. I didn't want to rock the boat. I would be afraid of asserting myself because I didn't want to rock the boat. Like, oh, what if he like, because I was still inundated with the programs that told me that I had to um do things out of fear of abandonment because that's one of my own personal wounds is abandonment. So I was operating from that place and that love triggered that wound. And so it would keep me from actually embracing conflict. Whereas conflict can be really good because that's a sign that you both recognize that you're both two different people trying to create a life together. So conflict is a part of the creative process. It's similar to like, if you're in a creative career environment and you need to brainstorm and you're like, yeah, I don't like that idea. How about this? How about this? So it's about having a level of detachment, not complete like cutting of cords, no, but a level of distance so that you're able to hear someone else's ideas and be able to like compare them with your idea and be like, would this work? Would this work? That's essentially what you guys are doing when you're creating a life. You're like, what works best for both of us? It requires you to be creative. It requires you to come up with ideas. It requires you to not be lazy. That is a part of the process. And so when it comes to connecting with others in a relationship, it's really important to embrace conflict and understand that conflict is a part of the creative process. You're literally like you're a universe unto yourself. He is a universe unto himself. And you guys are coming together to create a vision, a life, something that's long lasting, ideally, right? So it's a no-brainer that conflict would exist. It's about learning how to communicate through that conflict. And one of the things that I learned it from this book called Nonviolent Communication. And it's this idea that you can communicate with empathy and collaboration and harmony and peace. Like you don't always have to like fight and be emotionally violent when you're in conflict. And one of the things that they talk about in the book is it's like a four-step process in the communication process. The first being so it was observation, feelings, needs, requests. So you observe what the issue is. Like, okay, this is what's going on. This is my trigger right now. This is what's happening. and then you have this is how I feel about it. So I feel, let me give you an example. So you guys are, you live together, you guys do laundry together, whatever. So now that he has mixed his laundry, like he's mixed whites with the blacks, and you're like fucking pissed off because this is the 100th time he's done this and it's annoying you. So you're like, you've observed the issue, which is you're mixing laundry. The feelings, I feel like you're disregarding my feelings about it. It makes it harder for me. It makes it harder for me to do the laundry because you're mixing laundry. I need you. The third is speaking your needs. I need you to separate the laundry, or whatever the case may be. And then your request is, this is what I'm asking from you. I'm asking you to, like, I need you to do this. I'm asking you, oh, I need, no, the need would be like, I need more order because it overwhelms me when there is chaos. And then your request would be, I need you to separate the laundry the way I've asked you to, because it helps me to organize the laundry before I do it. Does that make sense? So it's this idea that there's a way to embrace conflict in a non-violent way. There's a way to there's a way to do that in a non-violent way, but it's important to embrace conflict because you are two whole people coming together. It doesn't help you if you're aligning with his desires and you haven't spoken up about yours. It doesn't help you to align with her desires if you haven't spoken up about yours, because compromise is what creates the crisis, because you're no longer connected to yourself. You're shifting your alignment to somebody else, and that's not how we create conscious and healthy relationships. But yeah, so I think that just about wraps it up. Yeah. So it's examining the roles that you play and why, letting go of the obsession with a man leading the relationship, or the like that there's a dominant person that has to lead the relationship and make all the decisions. It's about learning how to connect to yourself fully, wholly, completely, and that takes time. And then it's about learning to connect to others in a way that is non-violent and that is not enmeshment and that is more realistic. So it's the idea that like fantasies do play a role when it comes to desire, but you want to be conscious of that so that you're not projecting your fantasies even when you're sober consciousness is needed. Does that make sense? So there's a dance that needs to happen. There's a dance that, you know, the dance that needs to be played. But yeah, so I think I don't have any more points in my notes. So I think that is all. I will be posting a PDF on my Patreon page where we will be reflecting on the things that I've spoken about today, and you can download that. If you're not on my Patreon page, you can find it in my shop. I'll be putting it up for sale as a little ebook. But if you're on my Patreon, you can download it for free. So join my Patreon. I think that'll be worth it because I'll be having a lot more content up on there. So yeah, thank you so much for tuning into this class. You can follow me on Hey Tandy on Twitter and Instagram, and you can follow the site Vibrational Shots on Instagram and Twitter as well. And join my Patreon page, patreon.com/vibrational shots. You can join my White Lotus Portal community. You can join my White Lotus Portal community there. And yeah, you'll have access to, right now I've committed to doing 2 classes a month. You'll have early access to the Vibrational Shots podcast. You'll have self-care tips up on there, and you'll have digital exclusives like the PDFs from each class. Like I'm gonna do like a whole space where you can reflect on the things that I've spoken about in the class. And yeah, that is all for today. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Tandiwe, and yeah, until next time, bye.